Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Nice to see everybody. We have a fantastic day today planned for day 2 of StageX. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for being here. The energy the past 2 days has been incredible in every room, every hall, every session, and here today. So thank you so much. Today we're kicking off on the topic of bravery in higher education, and what a better way to do that than with 3 incredible university leaders. Today, President Michael Crow of ASU will be joining us alongside President Sian Bailock of Dartmouth, and Chancellor Pradeep Khosla of UC San Diego. They'll be joined on stage by the incredible Douglas Belkin of the Wall Street Journal, whose reporting has been essential in illuminating the crossover between higher education, workforce, and the economy. He has contributed to journal projects twice nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Please give a warm welcome to our first panelist of the day.
I go there. What? I think.
Good morning. Great to see everybody. This is a fascinating moment in higher education, and I think this Crossing the Chasm title is particularly fitting for the moment we're in right now. We're going to look forward in this panel, but I wanted to level set for just a minute to talk about the chasm that people are talking about crossing over. And one way to do that is just to think about where the sector was a decade ago. If you think back to where things were, confidence in higher education was about 15 or 18 points higher among the American public in colleges and universities. 7 out of every 10 high school graduates went to a 4 or 2-year school. That's dropped to 6. The ROI for universities has remained flat on average. We're now seeing a decline for the last few graduating classes. And of course, of late, we've got a situation with, we all right? The research model that you all depend on is under fire. The international students that the university system has depended on for a long time is also under fire. And of course, after years of building universities, we're seeing the closure of about 1 a week now. And finally, we're entering a period of this demographic cliff where there's going to be about 15% fewer high school graduates over the next 18 years, and that probably is not going to slow down anytime soon. I spoke to President Crow a couple of months ago and laid some of these things out, and he said, "I see opportunity," which was, I thought, a perfect answer, and why we're all wearing ASU badges this morning. If I could, President Bailock, you have written a lot about the importance of generating trust. Why does that matter, and how can we do it?
Yeah, I think it is so important that we define who we do this education for. And as American universities with a global reach, I think our first constituents are the American people. And if there's not trust in what we do, that has implications for government overreach, it has implications for funding from Congress and others, and implications for what people are choosing in terms of where they go. And I think it's very clear that many of our universities, we lost our mission, and we have to get back to what that is. And let me be clear, Dartmouth is an educational institution. We focus on training students and producing scholars, producing knowledge. We're not a political organization. We're not a social activist organization. Those are important, but it's not what we do. And when we can be focused on what our mission is, which is education, people trust the graduates we're producing, and they trust the knowledge we're producing. And there really needs to be a push across all of our institutions to reclaim that mission and those values moving forward.
President Koso, when we spoke, you'd mentioned that one of your concerns is dealing with shared governance and faculty. Moving universities forward is not simple. So let me throw that one at you. How do we move forward so that universities can continue to innovate and remain nimble?
So the concern is not dealing with shared governance. Shared governance with the UC regions is defined very clearly. The education and grading and delivery of courses belongs to the faculty, the rest is the administration, and then the faculty have advisory role, everything else. That's not the issue. The issue is when there is scope creep, when you start focusing more on activist type of issues rather than focusing on academic mission. So I would much rather that the academic senate focus more on the quality of education, the graduation rates, the outcomes-oriented process, rather than focusing on if you took the encampment down, should you have a no confidence against you? There are problematic situations. So I think overall shared governance in the UC system works really well. But I was thinking when I was talking to you more about the general notion of shared governance is more about scope creep into the administration.
Right. President Crow, there is so much pressure on the sector. You guys have obviously innovated a lot, but you see opportunity. Can you describe what opportunity you see in the moment we're in?
Well, I mean, we're living at a moment now with unbelievable noise, and so literally and figuratively. So the opportunity that I see is, we go through these. If you look at John Meacham's book, American Struggle, and you look at the writings that he brought to bear and his analysis of those, what you see is that the country evolves in a rough road, always evolving up, making progress, ups and downs, sideways, disruptions, everything that you can imagine. And now where we are is, as we're moving along, we're seeing that the ideals of our democracy are becoming more realizable. We have tools and devices to educate more people. We have systems in which we're still building economic opportunity and growth, even unevenly, but progress nonetheless. And so one has to sort of keep their eye on the ball, which is that, are we making net progress? And the answer is yes. Are we advancing on that net progress? Yes. Do we have now a tool? A lot of people are fearful of AI. We have a tool now that in short order will be available as basically a learning assistant to every human that wants to use these things as a learning assistant. We never had anything like that before. This morning I was asking my AI system, I was trying to understand how the Mercians turned into the dominant group that ultimately became the English. And there was a whole bunch of things I didn't understand. And so I'm just asking it while I'm walking this morning, hundreds of questions. Man, this like died and gone to heaven for me. And so nobody even laughs. You guys know who the Mercians, everybody's out there saying, who are the Mercians? There were people that lived in England before there was England. And so the point is that the opportunity that we have now is beyond conceptual belief, even from 75 years ago. And we're all bollocksed up in the arguments that we're having. We're all bollocksed up in, I don't like this person, or I don't like that person. Okay, well, I think people have probably not liked each other for a long time. And so there's nothing new about that. So the opportunity is just continued acceleration of the way in which we are moving forward our entire country.
So let me ask you to shoot forward, all of you. I mean, we do have this new tool, AI. It's reshaping everything. What do you see? How do you expect it will be used 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How do you think it will reshape the university?
Well, Dartmouth, for those of you who don't know, actually coined the term artificial intelligence in a 1956 conference on our campus. And we earlier this year announced a university-wide partnership with Anthropic and their Claude tool, and Claude's named after Claude Shannon, who ran the conference on Dartmouth's campus. So we think, as the birthplace of AI, we have a responsibility to define how it plays a part in how humans think. And we are really at the table to be able to lead, so it's not just the AI companies telling us how AI will work in the classroom or with our young people, but really university experts thinking along with them. And I am excited about the possibilities to think with this technology. And that is where universities can play such an important role. Knowledge is now ubiquitous. As Michael said, you can get it anywhere. But learning to think with the technology, to have those human skills such as discernment, empathy, the ability to talk face to face, to grapple with difference. These are the kinds of skills that our environments, that our curricula can teach, and having students work with the technology to advance prosperity, to advance our democracy, I think is a really exciting place to be.
So let me add to that. So UC San Diego was the first place to define this Department of Cognitive Science. And the whole reason was that there was a confluence of computing and understanding the brain. And so that was the cog sci. And Xian, by the way, is an alumni, and she's a
I was a cog sci major.
She was a cog sci major.
And it was hard.
Exactly, and it still is hard, right, regardless of. So, and also the last Nobel Prize in AI, which was a shock to me that they would give a Nobel Prize in AI, but I'm glad they did, was basically his postdoc work. Jeffrey Hinton's postdoc works at UC San Diego. So I'm a Carnegie Mellon graduate, so I was there when AI was actually in its initial stages. I was at DARPA when we were building the drones in 94, 95, 96. So for a long time, I never thought that ChatGPT would happen in my lifetime. We've had computer vision advances, we've had speech understanding, we've had character recognition. We had a lot of AI for the last 25 years, but the difference between that AI and ChatGPT, it looks like a human. It has language capabilities. And that is what is scaring people right now. If you ask me how it's going to be used, I think it's going to be the single most empowering tool for every individual. Every individual who can understand and find time to work with it would be empowered very significantly, would be enabled very significantly. Now, having said that, I can also see the differences between those who are using it and those who are not using it. Remember, it's like the internet age, the haves and have-nots of information is going to become wider and wider and wider. So for me, that is a challenge, that society is not only going to be divided on economic basis, but also on who's empowered, who's enabled, and who has access to what, right? So I think that's what we have to figure out. How does this tool empower more than not?
So in 2 weeks, 75 of our students, half in Los Angeles and half in Phoenix, in a class being taught by the engineering savant and artist Will I Am, are going to present their agentic selves. So they've been spending months building an agentic self. They sit in a classroom with microphones in front of them, set in a Harvard Business School seminar style, and they then have been working and building this way in which their ideas, their expressions, their interests, their needs, their learning habits, their transactional desires, everything that they need to do is being built. So we're attempting to apply a new way in which empowerment of the learner. There's all this fear. I talked to some faculty yesterday. It's like, this is, you guys are the devil incarnate. You're going to use AI to wipe out the faculty. Are you kidding me? We are not able to even begin to scratch how to teach so many people, how to build the systems. I mean, there's no one that's going to be replaced. Learning is going to be enhanced. Identity is going to be protected. Individual self, the true libertarian expression in American democracy of your ideas controlled by you to advance your interests are going to be empowered by all of this. And this class that we have is an unbelievably powerful expression of that. So we're like embracing this as a tool to enhance learning outcomes for as many people as we can reach.
I did a little math before I came up here. There's 41 years of presidential leadership on stage, and more than $2 billion of research money that comes in, and that's being shaken up right now. Talk, if you could, a little bit about the opportunities and the problems if the system that's stood up American ingenuity for so long is under fire.
So, I think a year ago, we were all shocked when all the budgets were cut by 50%. But having said that, post that announcement by the
proposal,
by the White House, all of us went and lobbied Washington, D.C. And one of my trips, when I met only with the senators from red states, I learned that they don't want to cut research. I think they all understand the power of research, mainly because of the threats from China and other countries. And to maintain superiority technologically, we have to invest in research. Now, having said that, I think as universities, we have to make sure that we don't see research investments by the public, you all, as an entitlement. We see that as a necessary thing to empower not just the universities, but to empower the public and to improve our economy. So I am pretty bullish about where this is going to be, regardless of what the administration is. There might be cuts up and down 5, 10%, but I don't think it's going to be wiped out.
But this goes back to trust. If the American people and their representatives trust the knowledge, the medical advice, the people we are putting out, there's more support for what we do. And Dartmouth runs the most rural academic medical center in the country. We serve 5 states. And the impact we have on those economies and the ability to care for life and people in aging is so important. And I don't think as universities we've told that story very well. We have talked about it as an entitlement. And so for the last year and a half, I've spent a lot of time in DC. I think I'm counting almost a trip a month to tell the story of what we do. And we've all been working with the federal government to come up with better models for how we together fund the research that's so important to this country and the world. And as someone who believes a lot in talking and dialogue, it turns out that we all do want to go in a lot of the same directions, but that funding from the government is vital to the work we do. It's vital to the drugs we produce, and it's vital to our ability as a country to compete on a world stage.
Yeah, what I would add is that we've had an 80-year run with an unbelievable model, which basically said we're going to give the universities some money if you give to us national security, national economic growth, and national healthcare outcomes. And so that was the deal. And the deal was, and we'll kind of leave you alone. But we haven't had sustained 4, 5, or 6% economic growth for multiple years in a row for decades. We have a healthcare system that has the most expensive costs in the industrialized world, and we're not in the top 25 in terms of outcomes. So we have not delivered on the promise. We've delivered a lot. We've delivered a powerfully evolving economy that's outperforming other economies around the world, but we haven't delivered what we promised. And then along the way, Americans listen to academics speaking, and they're like, are they trying to build the United States, or are they trying to build something else? And so what we need is a little, and this is what we're getting right now, a little rejiggering of the model. And the model needs to be that we are interested in the success of all Americans. We're interested in the success of all medical outcomes. We need different systems, different models, new ideas. Please do what you did for us before and deliver more of that. And then I think people support us, but they'll be even more supportive going forward. So we have to learn how to take responsibility for outcomes. And that's what we're like someone else is responsible. No, we're responsible. If you're going to give us all this money, all this freedom of movement, all of this freedom of discovery, all this freedom of academic freedom, then you better deliver something for that, because we're paying the bills.
And again, it comes down to trust and this idea that we are taking responsibility for what we do and that we will be held accountable for the outcomes. And I think we didn't always think that we should be held accountable for the outcomes.
So I have to tell you, like being a California institution, so it's true that across the country, the trust in higher education has gone down, but we just ran a poll for just the UC system. Each one of our campuses did that individually. And I can tell you the good news is that Californians have more faith in the UC system than the rest of the country does in the higher education system.
I think that's true everywhere. People trust in their local
right.
systems. They see what it does. And the question is, how do we tell that story at a broader level and deliver for a country on those outcomes?
Yeah, the other thing in your statistics that you gave about the perceived importance of the universities, I mean, yes, it's gone down. It still ranks 3rd among all institutions, because all institutions have gone down.
Right.
So one has to be concerned about why it is that belief in institutions has deteriorated. Well, we have a socialization force going on right now with technologically enabled expression, which is altering all things. And we're lost right now in some of these technologically enabled expressions across the entire society. I mean, we have idiots purveying complete false images and complete lies and distortions of all kinds of things. How do you sort that all out? So it's going to take a little while for these idiots to be culled from the system.
And I will say that the data on trust shows that
some of them laughing out there?
You're waking them up.
the data on trust shows that one of the only institutions where trust hasn't gone down measurably is the military. which is interesting. And one of the reasons experts think that's the case is because the military is very clear about what they do and what they don't. And it comes back to this idea as higher education institutions, we have to be really clear about what we do.
It's also all volunteer. So,
You're taking responsibility for the universities at the center of the university or the faculty. The faculty decide who is going to be on the faculty to a large degree. They've been tilting left for a long time. You have to deal with this. How do you want to bring the academic center closer to the center? Is this just something that you deal with? How do you guys deal with this issue on campus?
So, look, for me, tilting left is not the issue. Activism is the issue. I don't care, activism, whether on the left or the right, is equally bad for an institution. So as an institution, we have to be, like Sian was saying, focus on education, focus on the academic enterprise, right? Now, for every society to make progress, if we were not tilting left, women would not have a right to vote. We would not be as equitable society as we are today. So there has to be some level of progressive thinking in a society for it to be making progress. But I think the question is it only left, or is it only right, or is it somewhere in the center?
Yeah, look, I think faculty own the values in the classroom, and that's really important. And I think it is a false idea that whatever party you're voting for is indicative of how you're going to teach in the classroom. I have a lot of faculty, for example, one faculty member, Russ Muirhead in our government department, who is on in the House for New Hampshire, a Democrat, but teaches across the spectrum in his classroom. And that's what we want. We want to open up the entire aperture of what students are taught so they can figure out how they want to think. So we're not telling them what to teach, we're telling them how to think. And that's where the concerns come in, that we have this intellectual narrowing where only certain topics are taught. And so as presidents, as deans, as provosts and leaders, I think there is a responsibility to ensure that we don't have an intellectual narrowing in such a way that students aren't getting the full array of information, that we're not giving them the ideas to learn how to think on their own. I want my students to go out and be passionate, to be activists, to go out and push, but I want them to understand the full array of opportunities so they understand what they are pushing for and how they're bettering the country.
yeah, what I would add is that, we teach over 20,000 courses, 6,000 faculty members, 800 plus degree programs. To characterize them in any particular way would be an egregious error. There's no commonality. There might be a few people that have these ideas and other people that have these ideas, and there might be some disciplines that are edging in a certain kind of way in the way that they're evolving, but to suggest that somehow the institutions themselves are ideologically driven, there may be individuals who are, but not the institutions.
Let me push back if I could on this, right? I mean, survey after survey have shown, I don't know specifically at ASU, but around the country, students feel concerned about speaking out in classes, that they're worried that if they cross the middle line one way or the other, they're going to be marked down, and it's really hurt free speech on campus to some extent and open expression. This seems like it's the mother's milk of the university. Without that, nothing else really survives. Is enough being done to elevate the notions of free speech on campuses now?
So if you look at a lot of those surveys, what they show is that students aren't as concerned about their faculty, but they're concerned about other students, canceling them. And that's why Dartmouth, which as an Ivy League university, we're the only Ivy League that has a green light from FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and we put this front and center. I believe that learning to understand and be tolerant and listen to viewpoints other than your own is one of the most important skills we can teach our young people today. And this is a culture at Dartmouth. We launched a program called Dartmouth Dialogues 3 years ago. Every student comes to campus, they immediately get training in how to listen, how to hear different points of view, to understand that a person's point of view is not their whole identity. And this carries through our entire curriculum. We have basically said that anyone in our community can invite a speaker to campus. We will support them. We will support security costs. People can protest, but you cannot disrupt. Free speech does not mean taking away another's free speech. And when you're very clear about what the boundaries are, it turns out you can have a wide array of speakers on campus in a culture that is accepting of that. And I will say that we saw this in play at Dartmouth just a few weeks ago. In 1 week, we had Pete Buttigieg, Ro Khanna, and Laura Ingraham on our campus. Certainly, there were some protests, but there was no disruption. And it's about creating a culture where different views can be heard, where you challenge, where the idea is to challenge rather than shut people down.
Actually, I completely agree with Sian. So even on our campus, people think that the right is not allowed. We have people from all across the spectrum come. What is clear is the boundaries are clear. You can protest, you cannot disrupt. And then we enforce those boundaries. We don't just let it go. And part of the problem is that when we enforce the boundaries, that's when the local activism starts. Some of the people within the campus don't want the boundaries to be enforced. And I think that's where I disagree with them. And we're going to enforce the boundaries. End of story.
And what I would add is we have the green light from FIRE, also the green score, and we have an A grade from the Anti-Defamation League, and we have protected free speech to an extreme. The funny thing, almost hilarious to me, is to be criticized for not protecting free speech by institutions that barely even know what free speech is. And so what I mean by that is it's just we have every configuration that you can imagine. We probably in the last 5 years had 65 turning point meetings on campus. We hosted one of the memorial services for Charlie Kirk, which had 7,000 people attended, on our campus. And then we're criticized by people on campus of why were we supporting a memorial service for a person that had been murdered. Well, because the students that were connected to this person wanted to have this memorial service. So we said, sure. Well, who paid for it and who did this and who did that? And so what you have to do is you have to offer explanation. Like Dartmouth, a student group can invite who they want and they cannot disrupt. It has to be safe. We have to make sure that things are safe. The one thing that I'm certain of relative to free speech is because of who I hear from, everything we do makes someone unhappy. Every single thing we do. And then if someone is interested in highlighting or accelerating that particular unhappiness, they pick like 4 people that are mad about this, and all of a sudden I see them on national television talking about the evils of Arizona State University. And I'm literally saying, are you kidding me? I mean, it's beyond belief because, it's just, I ask if other institutions could even attempt to protect free speech at the level that we do, or spend the money that we spend to protect and defend the art of free speech, I would be surprised to find very many that do that.
We've just got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to ask you guys to think forward a little bit, make a couple of predictions. What do you see 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that would maybe surprise the folks if you could go back in time and jump forward? What do you think's coming?
Well, I will say, and I think oftentimes it's surprising to hear this from an Ivy League president, but I don't think the traditional 4-year degree is the only way to do higher ed. There's lots of ways to do higher ed. ASU is innovating, UCSD is innovating in different ways, Dartmouth is innovating in different ways. And so I do see more options for alternative paths. We certainly have to train technical workers across our country, and I see there's being more tolerance and more understanding of different pathways to meet success. At the same time, and maybe I'm a little biased here, I believe that an elite university education will be more important than ever for developing the kinds of leadership and human skills that allow our leaders across sectors to meaningfully use technology for good. And if we don't use it for good, I think we're all starting to understand what the consequences are. And to me, that underscores the value of an education across the arts and sciences, where we're not only teaching students about the technology itself, but the ethics, the discernment, all of the issues that go with what it means to be human.
So I agree with Sian. Higher ed will be alive and well. What I want to say is higher ed has been a significant source of soft power for this country. And it's been eroding right now. I think it'll be back in business. We will again see higher ed being a significant source of soft power.
What I would say is that the aperture of sort of the number of humans that have been able to be engaged in the level of human creativity that people in this room have been able to express, the life outcomes that the people in this room have been able to attain, is only going to accelerate and widen. Now, I have no idea what happens in a society where we have less class structure, less sort of people being held down. But I have to assume, given all the progress that we've made as societies in the last couple thousand years, that it's the potential is unbelievable. And so these institutions are not going away. They weather everything. They move through everything. They adjust. They become more meaningful. And now, for the first time, we have a way to empower the aperture of learning to the widest possible spectrum.
A fitting note to end on. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Education and politics have always been intertwined, but right now, in a moment of deep division and rising polarization, the question feels even more urgent. Can education and politics still come together in service of students? To answer this question, we're going to be hearing from two amazing leaders, Andy Rotherham, co-founder and partner at Bellwether, and Rick Hess, Senior Fellow and Director of Education Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Joining them is Penny Schwinn, former Tennessee Commissioner of Education, who has led one of the most ambitious and far-reaching state education agendas in the country. Please give a warm welcome to Andy, Rick, and Penny.
Slide through here.
All right, so we're just going to jump in. Some ground rules, ABCs and Ds. So answer blunt, comprehensively, and directly. So I don't think we're going to have a challenge with that last one. So yes or no, is education political?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, so forget that then. What's your general thesis statement about this idea? Is it oil and water, PB&J? How do you think about that?
Politics is supposed to be political. The problem is that we have totalized politics so that people whose jobs are not political in research, in technology, and running school systems have gotten way the hell out of their lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you stop and think about what we're fundamentally doing, you're transferring knowledge, traditions, norms through generations. How would that not be political? I think like the most obvious thing is you look like thinkers from Plato to Rousseau to Mill to more recently, obviously, in the modern era, have lots to say about how we do that. That speaks to just how obviously political it is.
So I mean, when we're talking about politics, are we talking about policy? Are we talking about ideology? Is it a little bit of both? And is it more about how something gets passed, or is it more about actually what gets passed?
It's both. It's both of those things, but really, I think when we talk about politics, when we're using it as a negative, it's often because we're talking about motivation. The work of figuring out how do we handle schools or colleges in this or that way is about disagreement. Mm-hmm. And politics is the art of sorting out disagreement without hitting each other with sticks. The problem is, today, so much of politics feels like it's about signaling, like it's about click generation, and that's the kind of politics that gets us very far away from solving real problems.
Well, and what I'm interested in is when we think about politics and it's actually there's a policy, is it becoming more about identity than it is about the policy itself?
Yeah, this is like one of our core problems. Like even like when Rick and I started doing this work, there was much more sort of intermingling, and you didn't have people's, you know, people had views and positions, but your whole identity was not wrapped up in your politics, and that's been a real change. Social media has obviously fueled that, and so now you have, whether it's organizations, institutions, leaders, they feel like in public there's all these places they can't go, and people talk about this, and so you end up having a lot of these conversations that are just, you're not even getting to the core substance. It's positioning and so forth. And so again, there's always been politics, and there's always been, this is political, but sort of the degree of sort of partisanship, intensity, and frankly, toxicity. Yeah. I mean, I think anybody who looks at our politics right now and is like, I want to be part of that, is probably exactly the person you don't want leading you. And that's what we have to unwind.
Yep. So, you know, let's think about that. And on your point on signaling, we've got decades of some really political times. So, I mean, you think about the 50s and 60s, a lot of what happened in the 80s and 90s. Can you just kind of briefly talk through what is different about now? Is it different? Or is this just feel like a really big moment?
It feels like a big moment, partly because it is. Look, politics have always been part of education.
Yeah.
We all, we had busing in the 70s. We had fights over national standards in the 90s. We had No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top in the aughts. But what's different today is at least two big things. One is that during the busing fights, you saw clips of this with Walter Cronkite at 6 o'clock for 20 seconds with a lot of context. Now what you do is you share viral videos, and people are constantly responding and using this as a chance to signal which way they are on the issue. The second thing that's changed is between campaign finance reform and evolution in politics, that there's much more incentive as a professional politician to figure out how do you generate small donors and how do you activate kind of the base and get on podcasts and talk radio than there is to actually find ways to solve the problem. So what's happened is we've created a feedback loop where we reward bad behavior.
Yeah, and I think there's two big, I don't want to belabor Rick, I think what Rick said is spot on, but two things. One, social media that is what's new. It is not that we haven't had these very divisive issues over the generations. I mean, like people died in riots about which version of the Bible would be taught in school. So the idea that this is new and that, that was in the 19th century, there's a lot of people have like a really bad case of presentism. But what's different is, as Rick said, it's the intensity, it's on your phone. We're not meant to know what's like the worst thing that happens in your industry every day, right? Yeah. And we do know that, and it drives, as Rick said, it gets trolled. And the second thing is, we're just getting dragged along for a ride. If you look at most of these issues, there's consensus among 60 to 70% of the people across partisan identity, but you've got activists on a bunch of these issues, 15, 20%, depending on the issue, who are just dragging the rest of us along for a really unpleasant ride, and that is different, and social media gives them the ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. California, Maryland, Delaware, Texas, Tennessee, all completely different states. It has changed and morphed quite a bit over the last 2 decades. So, from your perspective now, K-12, who is the most political stakeholder group that we engage with, and who's the most influential? And are they the same?
That's a great question. I think everyone is, it's hard, it's the base of both parties. I mean, that's the first thing. Politicians are being completely held hostage by the base of both parties, and you see that, and there's plenty of cases with the Republicans on that, there's plenty of cases with the Democrats on that, and both sides seem to think it's the other party's base is the problem, and in fact so that's the most influential thing, and they're more concerned about being primary than they are about losing general elections. That's what's sort of killing us. In our sector, it's the same stakeholder groups. I mean, it's adult politics drive a lot of this. You've got big, powerful. I'm continually amazed after years of doing this. We're almost $1 trillion industry just in K-12, not even the higher ed folks who are with us here this morning. We have special interest groups that are among the largest special interest groups, most powerful ones in the country, and yet people still talk about it as if somehow in our sector it's different, and like our special interest groups are special and they're not like the other ones. Special interest politics is what it is.
Yep. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yep, that ditto. Well, then I'm giving you higher ed. So, higher ed's lost a little bit of trust. There is an argument about relevance and post-secondary and what that looks like. So, what's happened over the last 5 or 10 years there?
Novels.
In 2 sentences.
Russian novels. Right now what we're seeing is a fight. Higher ed allowed, Andy's 10% of bad actors on campus at the most visible and influential institutions to drive a whole lot of hugely destructive, crazy decisions on campus. And the bulk of faculty were like, we don't want to get called racist, so we're going to sit this out. College presidents showed exactly how gutless they are, which has been pretty much the story going back to, say, Cornell and Columbia 60 years ago. And so what happens is when you are taking enormous amounts of public money, when you are highly visible institutions with large public-facing component, and you refuse to have a reasonable conversation about the problems, eventually you get an unreasonable conversation. And that's the reason that Stephen Miller's probably the most important actor in higher ed right now, and it's because he is the guy who's most interested in having an unreasonable conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, and essentially, I think what's misunderstood is people are like, we're not getting rid of DEI. We've created this toxic situation where we're getting rid of coercive left-wing DEI and we're replacing it with coercive right-wing DEI. And I think that's a choice, again, that most Americans reject, and there's ample public opinion on that, but structurally, because of what we've allowed to happen, That's the world we're living in. At K-12, there's examples of that as well. And Rick's point on an unreasonable conversation is exactly right. And I think that's worth heeding even in this room when we think about edtech and some of these other issues. You have to be proactive even in this political environment or you will get the unreasonable conversation.
So, I mean, thinking about all those kind of big picture ideas, from your seat, what is the thing that your side either gets wrong or misunderstands the most? And I say your side very loosely in this very political conversation.
Yeah, well, as the man of the right, I'll say the thing that's been astonishing over the last 15 months with my friends in the Trump administration is that they are convinced that they can double down on all of the indefensible behavior of the Obama and Biden teams because the left has no hostages to take in higher ed. You know, the mindset is that all these institutions are part and parcel of the left, that we can go to the wall and there's nothing they can do to pay back. And I'm like, that's insane. The most dangerous thing in the world about setting precedents is that you are always equipping folks who disagree with you to come in and leverage those precedents more aggressively the other direction. That's exactly what we've seen with things like Title VI and Title IX under this White House. And I can only imagine what a President Newsom or an AOC administration would do with the precedents that are being set today.
Yeah, I would say I would take a slightly different direction. I think the problem the Democrats have is Trump is something he's very good at. He's sort of laid out like kind of an elegant mousetrap for them, which is he'll point out something that's common sense, like we have a crime and disorder problem in our cities, which anyone who's like walked around here probably has gotten a little sense of that. And then Democrats are like, well, if he's saying that, he can't validate that by agreeing with it, so you end up denying reality. And you see that like issue after issue. So you have this weird thing of Democrats somehow suddenly arguing there's no difference between men and women in terms of physicality, you know, at an elite level, which was just a sort of an insane argument on its face. And so the biggest problem Democrats are making is just leaving the center wide open, taking the bait on that again and again, marginalizing themselves and leaving the center wide open, which is where elections are won and again, where most people are, and just not speaking forthrightly. Like the pandemic, we're still having this like denialism that school closures like may have had an impact on student achievement, even though everything shows it. Why deny that? Acknowledge it, move on. People just want to see a remedy. Like they're not interested in sort of show trials and stuff. But Democrats can't acknowledge that. Can't acknowledge the learning loss. Can't acknowledge the parental demand for choice. Can't acknowledge that privacy laws are intended to protect kids' privacy, not to protect them from their parents. And that parents do need to have a role, and that's well established in the courts and in our society. And to the extent Democrats keep doing that, like they're going to continue to just leave the center open. The right's going to do the Stephen Miller thing that Rick just talked about, and Americans are going to continue to be incredibly frustrated about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, so talking to teachers and principals and folks on the ground and people who are trying to work in schools, it can be, I'll say frustrating, that'll be the polite way, to just figure out where does politics end? There's kind of what's happening at the federal level, then there's the state doing their thing, and you've got local politics. Have we reached a point in education where people would rather have a politically reliable school system, even at the expense of a high-performing one? Is that where we've gotten to?
And I think, I mean, this was very explicitly, it feels to me, like the trade that the progressives made after 2014. When hard work, when assigning homework, when rigorous grading all became signs of white supremacy culture, it became clear that crappy schools were okay as long as you were value aligned. And that seemed to become dogma. I was certainly excommunicated from all of the old purple landscape. And I think you just saw most funders, most advocacy groups, most major players on the left got terrified of the 10 to 15% of hardcore activists on this stuff. And that became the defining kind of vision, I think, for the left. On the right, the problem is, in responding to what I see as really toxic development, the right started off by saying, look, we actually have to redress this problem, but these things take on a life of their own. And pretty quickly what we found was that the most successful policy entrepreneurs on the right have been the people who scream the loudest. They're the ones who wind up on cable TV. They're the ones who mobilize the money. And so now I think what you've seen on the right, has moved from an attempt to recenter schools to a sense that, yeah, what matters is winning the cultural fight, that other stuff is a second order concern.
Yeah, I mean, I just rolled off another term on the Virginia Board of Education. And, going around the state, the political class, they want politically reliable schools in different ways. And there's a whole bunch of stuff on that. I rarely ran into parents who cared that much about that. They want schools that work. They want to know how their kids are doing. They want to be treated with respect. They want order, and they want schools to have some degree of discipline. They don't want it to be unfair. They're not, to the extent it's unfair, they want that addressed, but first and foremost, they want their kids safe. Their parents are actually really pragmatic, and so they don't have a place in this debate. Again, they're not, it's 10 to 15, on some issues, 20% of people on either side. Most people they don't have purchase in that. They don't understand it. They're just out there trying to live their lives, and we're not speaking to them right now. And that's been my experience, and I think what's happened, unfortunately, you mentioned cities and states. When I was at the White House, we used to say, well, politics were getting a little dysfunctional in Washington with everything that was happening towards the end of the Clinton administration, but states were still working great, and cities, so there was a lot of hope. That turned out to be a little rosy, right? Because the contagion in DC kind of jumped containment. It's in the states, and now it's even in some of the cities, and so our politics are breaking down. But again, I don't think that's what people want. I think they are dismayed by it.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot of leaders, especially at the state and local level, where they feel that, am I a politician or am I an educator? And job security and student achievement are not necessarily married anymore. They are two considerations. And so the bold leadership that is required to actually move things forward, we've lost a lot of that. So, this conference is about edtech. Let's talk a little bit about that backlash. Can you explain it, kind of maybe one word? What's the backsplash about from your side?
Look, I think the backlash, the one word is that it's been earned.
Earned.
We've had 20 years of overhyped, oversold ed tech that is generally disappointed. I've bumped into a number of folks at this conference who are designing some new AI kind of fueled this or that, and many of them, their education experience seems, mostly localized. Look, these parents, these educators, these communities have had vendors coming in and selling them solutions and overhyping the solutions for decades. Most of it's disappointed. If you go back and you read the claims made on behalf of one-to-one devices and screens and cell phones as late as 2014, 2015, 2016, it is impossible to read that side by side with what we're seeing in terms of the data on student well-being, in terms of parental concerns. The road of distrust has been hard-earned. If you don't acknowledge that, again, we've not seen a reasonable conversation about it. Most of the concerns have been either poo-pooed or demonized. And as a result, if you refuse for a long enough time to have a reasonable conversation, you wind up with an unreasonable conversation. Welcome to 2026.
Yep.
Rick, you said earned. You got their hopes up that at last we were going to talk about ROI, and then you dropped that on them.
Monetizing persistence, I believe.
Yeah. So look, I think it's three things, and they're getting conflated. Concern about social media, which is legitimate. I don't think you have to go sort of the full John Haidt to be really concerned about what's happening there. The second is concern about ed tech in schools, and there's lots of degrees of that concern. Concern about efficacy, concern about usage. School districts spend an awful lot of money on this, and as a lot of people in this room know, a lot of it doesn't actually get used. Concern about learning. And then third, this growing concern about AI, which is sort of anxiety sort of sector-wide, because everybody was great with technology till it came for the professional class, and now everybody's freaked out. And I think those things are getting mashed up. And I think there's two things. One, it is a real backlash, and it's not, if the industry doesn't get its hands on and really think about this strategically, it's not going to be 30 people in front of the Hyatt in the future. It's going to be much more substantial. And second, politicians, a lot of this they can't do a lot about. It's actually hard, and we're still in the early phase. Everyone wants to ban stuff. That's actually harder to do. Schools are the one place where politicians actually have a lot of leverage, right? That time in school, even though the real problem with a lot of this stuff is from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 the next morning, the thing politicians have control about is 7 to 3. And so you're going to see a lot of activity there because that's the one place with all these different things that's the political outlet. And so I think it's well worth paying attention to.
So given all of that, and everyone kind of has a different flavor of ice cream that they're interested in, so what would you say is the education controversy in the last decade that your side got wrong?
I mean, I think it feels to me, obviously it's all where we sit, it feels to me like most of the right's actions have been reactive over the last decade. And I think when you counterpunch, there's a real tendency to overreach. And I think most of what we've got wrong. So in 2025, I think we got Doge at the Department of Ed.
Yep.
We got wrong. Department of Ed, I'm all for dismantling it, abolishing it. There are really productive ways to cut it back dramatically. I don't think the Doge approach was it. The Higher Ed Compact, I think, was a ludicrous and destructive way to try to invite higher ed institutions into the problem solving.
Yep.
So finally, a point of disagreement. I am against abolishing the Department of Education. I think it's a lousy idea. So I'll give you two. One is literacy.
Yep.
The idea that we picked a Republican and a Democratic way to teach reading was insane. And we talk about the new science of reading, and Emily Hanford's work's amazing. This research, though, is 50 years old in many cases.
Yep.
We had a $1 billion reading program during the Bush administration that got torn down for politics. That was basically the science of reading. Like the partisan nature of reading, and we're one of the states right now that's ground zero for that, is terrible. And I think the second issue is we need to build a more inclusive country, a more inclusive society. But the Democrats have picked, so 70% of people oppose harassment, discrimination of transgender individuals. That 70% in this climate. That is great. That's a number that will go up. But instead, the Democrats have seized on the most marginal issues, and as a result have actually put a target on the back of a lot of gay kids, a lot of trans kids, and I think that's a place we need just a radical rethink. The fact that you have 70% of people saying non-discrimination and people are saying like everyone's against us is just such a profound misreading of this country and its politics, and that's going to continue to have huge consequences. And it's one of these issues that may seem marginal, but it erodes trust in public schools.
Okay, this is the last question. You get one word or 2 words, depending on the title answer. It's literacy. I got to say something about it. Has to be a #1 priority. Sorry, but in all cases. So a little homework from the teacher. If these folks are walking away with one thing to read that will make them smarter, better, stronger in this area, what is the thing that they have to read?
Charles Payne, so much reform, so little change.
Love it.
Oh, that's a solid one, but I would say I'd read Natalie Wexler and some of the other people who are writing about curriculum and knowledge, because science of reading is not just phonics, it's comprehensive. The folks who are trying to integrate that with civics. Sorry, too many words. But.
Nope, that's all right. Love it. Thanks so much. Appreciate you both. And
Thanks,
let's
Penny.
just keep getting politics out of schools.
Always fun, right?
Okay. We're going to get a little bit quick interactive here. Show of hands for people who loved math. Math's your favorite subject. Okay, lots of math lovers. If you're not raising your hand, you might be after this next speaker. Po Shen Lo's energy is infectious. His love for math, for learning, for pushing boundaries is absolutely incredible. He actually vibe coded a solution last night to show you all today. So you're in for a treat. Not only is he a professor at Carnegie Mellon, a founder, a world-renowned mathematician, he has an amazing passion for solving real-world problems. So please give a warm welcome to the stage to Po Shen Lo.
Well, hello, guys. Well, hello, guys. How are you? Raise your hand if you're asleep. Do you see how hard it is to get through to people who are asleep? Actually, as an educator, that's sort of the way I think about it. If my students are asleep, it's not working. Okay? Another thing. How many of you had a teacher that you really liked in school? Or as a professor, or something like that? Teacher that you just really looked up to? Okay? Keep your hands up if that made you actually like that subject. Yeah. Okay, as you can tell, this talk's already going to be a little bit different because I can't talk at people. So last night I was up until 1 a.m. vibe coding something. Let's see if it works. If you want to join the chat, if you scan that QR code, you should be able to chat with me on stage because I'm a live streamer. If you can't scan it because you're too far away, the website is psloh.com. And it should actually have something which lets you put your fake name in. This is the same website we use to teach kids, so we say fake name because we don't want private information. But if you want to send some messages or feedback or thoughts as this whole talk is going along, please feel free to play with it. I actually have a team back home which is helping to moderate the messages. They might reply to things. Hey, it works. All right. So this will be a lot more fun because this talk is actually for you guys. It's not just for YouTube. You guys are here. So as things come along, yep, sounds good. And as you can see, some of our people are helping to reply to some of these messages as well. I put this here because one of the things that I find beautiful about bringing together large groups of people is that all of you have ideas. Obviously, not just me. So as this is all going along, feel free to just dive in and interact with other people. I don't know if you're like me, but when I was in school, I was that kid who liked to pass notes. I'm sorry. I was that kid. When I was in the classroom, I wanted to be able to let my voice be out there. Actually, I have a theory, which is that a lot of kids like this. And so if you give them something, it works. So this actually works. So the vibe coding apparently works. Thank goodness. I wasn't sure if it would fail. I actually do have a background in computer stuff as well, but I actually don't write lines of code anymore. But anyway, let's continue on with the talk. So the first thing we discovered, you got to get people. Funny thing is I discovered that if kids are interacting with you, they're not asleep. Not that you guys are kids, but I can see that there's some people playing inside this now. Yeah, how will I moderate this chat? We actually have people distributed across the world right now who work with us, who are actually helping to reply. You might even notice. I'm sorry, we didn't invite Donald Trump. But actually, he's welcome to come. If you'd like, if anyone can tweet real Donald Trump, he's welcome to join too. Anyway, whatever. But so let me continue with another point, right? So why did I think about all this stuff? It's because when I was a kid, I watched PBS. Did anyone else watch PBS? There was this documentary I saw recently. It was called Butterfly in the Sky. Can anyone guess what TV show that was? Reading Rainbow. That documentary is beautiful. And inside that documentary, the founders of that show made some comment, which was that, I think it was in the 80s or something, which was that people weren't reading anymore. And they came up with this crazy idea to fight fire with fire and to go and use TV to teach people reading. I thought that was really neat. Really brilliant insight. And it worked because as a kid growing up, my parents weren't always free to play with me, so there was good old PBS. Although I will tell you my favorite show was not that one. I was fascinated by this show called Where in the World is Carmen? San Diego, and we're in San Diego right now. So I feel very good being in that city, which I did not know was a city until I watched that show. I thought it was the name of a criminal. But anyway, so it was fun. And when you go and watch TV shows or you think about things as a kid, it really influences your dreams. So one of my dreams was someday to go and see the world. Actually, because I was growing up in Wisconsin. So my dream was to someday see the world. I was in this town, Madison, Wisconsin. My parents, we were on the edge of town. If you walked past our property line, you were out of town. 1.5 miles away, cornfields, right? So I was always interested in what was the rest of this world. So I made a kind of a goal for myself to somehow see the world. If you see the other part of the screen, you see that that's sort of what I do now. Because for 10 years, I was the national coach of the US Olympic math team. And I started traveling all around, trying to find out how to build math excellence. But actually, after some point, I will tell you, I got more interested in trying to build great people, which is not actually the same as building people who are the top 1% or the top 0.1%. So in this talk, I'll talk a bit about education. I want you guys to know my main goal is not to build elite in the sense of top whatever percent, but to build lots of great. But great. We'll get to that soon too. Okay, so as I was traveling around all over the world, I was going into classrooms, I was observing how people were doing education. I was observing also that there's obviously lots of different access to different kinds of education all around, right? Oh, Mr. Rogers, by the way, I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania now. WQED is right there. So all of these, I'm very, very inspired by all of these TV shows and different ways to get through to the general public. But as I was traveling around, I saw, it would be really great to make it so that everyone can get opportunities. And then, in some sense, that was supposed to be the promise of online, right? Actually, when I was a kid growing up, my dad was he's a professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was one of these people experimenting with online education on the dial-up modem. He was teaching classes on I don't know how he did it, actually, but somehow he was doing this. The only problem is any of us who experienced Zoom class looking over the shoulders of our kids, or any of us who were teaching on Zoom class, know that it was a little bit painful. There are definitely people here who are pioneers in distance learning, so congratulations to all of you for what you do. But I decided to take a note from reading Rainbow. And I decided, I wonder if there's some way to go and make online education something that kids would actually watch. What do kids watch nowadays? YouTube, Instagram Live, Twitch, TikTok. So I'm going to talk through a few things today. First, I'll talk through something we actually did in terms of making something. Then that's just like the technology itself. Then I'll talk through ecosystem, which is how you take technology and you make it interact with lots of people. And the last thing I'll close with is philosophy, which is what we're actually after, okay? So I want to show you what we actually turned online math class into. We teach lots of middle school kids. And you'll know why when I talk about the philosophy. We love teaching middle school kids. And the way we do it is we find pairs of high schoolers to live stream together. I'll show you what it looks like first, and then I'll talk through and I'll geek out over what we actually did to make this happen. So I'm going to show you a highlights reel, which is about 45 seconds long, which has lots of pairs of high schoolers teaching together, live streaming over the internet in small Zoom rooms with about 30 kids in them at a time. Normally, you learn from the same 2 people for an entire hour, but this is just to give you a feel for it. We turned online math class into this. I pressed the wrong button. Here we go.
Which means we're not playing videos.
Same thing as just adding 1 to n and then multiplying by 3.
The absolute differences will change.
Like, boom.
Equality between those two facts.
We do count as 2 separate things in the end.
Like, at least understand. We approve that.
Hi, everyone.
And then we look, we say, okay.
You will get triple stars for that.
A really special thing about your city.
You use the exact same logic from over here.
Wait a second.
Or 1001. You can check it and let us know.
And I liked seeing that you guys were using your critical thinking.
So we actually turned math class into a Twitch gaming stream. If you know what that is, if you've got kids at this age, this is exactly what they're watching. The only way we were able to do that is I asked high school students, what do people actually like? You think I know? I'm 40-something. Okay? So I asked the high school kids were like, we want the lights. We want this stuff. We want that stuff. I was like, okay, cool. Let me go find lights. Where do you buy them? Amazon.com. I shipped $300 of lights to some kid's house in Ohio. He's awesome. His name is Eddie. Anyway, a week later, he figured out which small subset of them to use. Bingo, we got this. This is a standard kit. But let me tell you more. Did you notice the people who are live streaming look excited? We have a secret weapon. We're the first people in the history of education to put a professional actor in every single classroom, and you can't see the actor. Here's what happens. The high school students who are doing this, they each get the equipment we send them, which is 2 screens. 1 screen for the Zoom call with 30 kids in it who are taking a class. Inside that Zoom call, we have the 2 high schoolers. We also have a professional actor. If any of you guys are running acting schools, we hire, okay? We have a professional actor. The actor is camera off, mic off, paying attention to everything. On the second screen, the high schoolers, each high schooler has 2 screens. On their second screen, they have a separate simultaneous video call. It's using Discord, which is what these kids like to use anyway, okay? And it's a Discord video call which has the actor, camera on, mic on, and the 2 high schoolers, and they can all see and hear each other. So here's what happens. While they live stream this math class, they're getting real-time feedback on the other channel on how to be more interesting. Okay? This, by the way, not only makes the class interesting, it solves a fundamental incentive alignment problem. I created this thing because I wanted to scale the opportunity for interesting problem solving, challenging education all over the world. You know what's the limiting factor? We need people to teach. How do you motivate people to teach? Pay high schoolers? That's child labor. No, absolutely not. Actually, I'll tell you the very first high schooler, and this was my oldest daughter. She's now 19. Actually, she's somewhere in Bordeaux or something right now in France. I don't know what she's up to. But anyway, but in any case, when I started this, the observation I made was, did you know that there's all these high schoolers who are actually really good at math and science, but the thing that they really could use is communication skills? Have you ever met a math science person for whom their life would be made much better if they learned how to interact with everyone else? Yes, so this is now a win-win. The way we explain it to the high schoolers, all you have to do is live stream about the Pythagorean theorem, and we will teach you how to get a date. Now you know If it's a high school student, that's real currency right there, okay? Because actually, as they're going, the people who are giving them feedback, we've got people who are singers, we've got people who are dancers, we've got people who are actors, you know? This is a win-win. It turns out there's a lot of high schoolers out there who want to do this. We do pay them too, but they're not doing it for the cash. They're doing it because this increases their chance to pass every interview of their life. It increases their ability to pitch venture capitalists. It increases their ability to lead an organization. These are people who can think, okay? So that solves that supply problem. And I was able to do this because the university I teach at, Carnegie Mellon, happens to be one of the top drama schools in the country. So I walked over to the drama department, and that's how we've got our first batch of actors. And it turns out that in America, we can solve their problem too. There's a lot of performing arts folks looking for part-time paid remote work jobs. This all works. Actually, let's now talk about the ecosystem side, because I just talked about the technology side. To be honest, the technology is not the hard part. The hard part was observing what people actually want, okay? And then, like even last night, I vibe coded this thing. Right? So the way we do that, the way we calibrate to the real world is I do travel all around. I'll be in Scottsbluff, Nebraska on Thursday. Wait, that's 2 days from now. Anyway, okay, so that's 2 days from now. And I'll be going into classrooms. What I always do in those in places is I go in and the teacher introduces me as, hey kids, you guys got a sub for today. His name is Mr. Poe. That's it. That's the intro. I do that in Baltimore. I do that in inner city Los Angeles. I do that in rural Montana. Mr. Poe, undercover sub, drops in for a visit. Okay? In every single classroom, what I do is I go and find out, hey, what are you guys learning right now? And I'll go and teach you something harder than what you're usually learning. I found out that so many kids rise to that challenge. Okay? So when we talk about ecosystem creation, the observation was there's a need. Turns out there's all these people who actually want to learn how to think. Well, we don't just teach standard concepts, by the way. We even have ideas that we want to change. Well, not ideas, we do. We get to set our curriculum because we have a scalable force of people who can do all of this. That's the first thing, because there's all these kids who want to teach. And also, then we can decide what we want to teach. Because what we always talk about in these education conferences is, let's make change. But what kind of change? You need to be able to get people to do it, right? So now we have this group of people who actually are really good at problem solving. And so we lead classes that are just problem solving. We say, here's a problem. What do you think? We're not going to teach you. You tell us. You know how many kids say that they don't like math class because they have to do it the teacher's way? The teachers don't have a way. We're going to do it your way. We're going to go with your ideas. And that's why we got 2 of them. Because if you stump one of them, there's still the other one. It's actually really hard for one teacher to lead a class of brainstorming. In ours, it's even better. You stump both of them, one of them tells jokes while the other one Googles it. I'm just trying to show you how there's some things inside this creation where we are cheating the system, darn it. Actually, also, we've solved the scaling problem because it turns out 2 people can lead 30 people in a great discussion. It turns out that the reason kids were bored wasn't because you need to be one-on-one to stare at them. It was because you need the right format. They actually wanted to voice themselves. If you've noticed in this talk, we have multiple channels. Me talking, visual, and chat. That's super powerful. There can be a discussion during the entire thing, and we actually hire people to help manage that at the same time. Now let me just finish up with a few more comments about, how come we can scale? It's actually because with that ratio, 2 teaching 30, think about it. That's awesome. That also has a massive reproduction factor. That's why we're teaching middle school kids, because the middle school kids, who do they want to be when they grow up? The high school kids. Times 15 every time. How many things are there that could potentially scale by a factor of times 10 or so every 4 years? We're just producing them. Because my philosophy is, actually lots of people can do this. And now let me get to what we're going to do with all this. So I'm a crazy guy. I'm a social entrepreneur. So I didn't come here for investors. If you want to invest, I'm sorry, the answer is no. We don't take it. Okay? So I don't take it. That's because we're actually quite humanitarian. A lot of stuff we do is also free that we give out afterwards. But okay, so we then have a mission. The mission is we've rethought, what should education even be for? What are we trying to make anyway? People who can write code? I just vibe coded this last night. People who can do math problems? Well, no, we have something else. And I've named this philosophy. We want to make people who are thoughtful. Okay, I'm a math guy, hence the plus sign. Sorry, guys. But this is a play on words. Thoughtful, what does that mean? That means you actually care about people. That is super important to me because I think in this world we got too many people who just want skills, who don't care about anyone. Okay? Also, though, you gotta be full of thought. If you can't think, how do you engage in discourse? We just had a talk just now. We want people who both like people and can engage in discourse, and here I've even defined it. Okay? I'm a math guy. It turns out that the most valuable part of math is defining stuff. Serious. A thoughtful person is somebody who actually derives great joy both from delighting other people and achieving understanding through their own thought. I've been thinking about what kind of society will survive after this age of AI or whatever, when, what are the opportunities? You know how many people tell their kids, or we might tell our students, study hard, because then you can get a good job, and you can have a nice house, and you can have a great career, and you'll be comfortable. Do you know what word is in all of that? You. That's the problem. That's why they decide they'd rather play video games and get their AI girlfriend, which will be the end of society. I'm not a professional biologist, but the last I checked, if everyone gets AI girlfriends, there will be no more people. That's the easiest way for robots to take over the world. But that does scare me a lot, because every time I go into a college cafeteria, you know what I see? What is this? I thought you were supposed to get to know people. Okay? So I'm looking at the future of humanity, and what I'm seeing is that we got a problem. There's so many people who think that the point of life is themselves. It's not going to work. It worked for a while, got you a job. Soon you're not needed for that job. What kind of people do we want? Ones who actually like other people. And the second one, to be able to actually think. These two things that I wrote, unfortunately, a lot of what we see, a lot of what kids see, tells them to do the opposite of both. Life's about me, and don't think. So what we made here is an ecosystem where we're running all around. We're getting high schoolers to spread this philosophy, being thoughtful, to younger people, to incubate younger people, to go and do this, to want to be the high schoolers, to go back around and around and around. Scalability, who knows? We'll see. I'll be giving another talk this afternoon. If you're from rural, one of the places we're going is for rural, so I'll be talking there. But ultimately, what we work on is for everyone. If you want to continue collaborating with us, that particular pslow.com has a button called Contact. We'll get in touch with you. We'd love to continue working with everyone to build a more thoughtful world. Thank you.
You did it! At ASU+GSV, we've remained committed to the fact that education is a bipartisan issue, which is why we're so proud in the fact that we've had the past 6 secretaries of education join us on this stage. So at a time when so much in public life feels divided, then this next conversation asks a simple but important question. What does it actually take to find common ground in education? You'll hear from Arnie Duncan, Managing Director at Emerson Collective, Margaret Spellings, President and CEO of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and they'll be joined by Ben Wallerstein, CEO of Whiteboard Advisors, or as many of us know, for more than 2 decades, the go-to advisor for some of education's most influential investors, nonprofit leaders, and companies. Please give them all a warm welcome to the stage.
Well, welcome everyone. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here, and I'm sure a head scratcher for my parents and my sister that I'm up here with 2 former U.S. Secretaries of Education as the sole member of my family that's not a teacher. But super grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation, and as always, extraordinarily appreciative of Deborah and Michael for putting so much effort into creating a really inclusive environment here and bringing so many different voices and perspectives to the table for so many years. Just to start off, if you all can maybe just tell us what you're doing now. What's the life of a former U.S. Secretary of Education? What are you passionate about, and what are you choosing to spend your time on these days? And maybe we'll start off with Secretary Spellings.
I am the leader of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and as you can see, my bipartisanship is breaking out everywhere. My work is nearly done, so I'll soon be returning to Texas. But Our middle name is Policy, and our first name is Bipartisan. And I believe, and why I stay on the field every day like you, is that, you know, there's really a lot more in common than there is that divides us, especially around education. You wouldn't know it by some of the things that are coming out of Washington, but people care about kids. They want their children to succeed. They want them to have the skills to access the economy. They want them to be able to read and participate in our society. And so that's why I'm here and passionate. And, you know, Arnie and I we can get along. Can't we be friends? We are friends. I mean, game over. But anyway, I think it's important for those of us who've done this work and seen some fruit in the labor to stay committed to it and keep on, because we know what to do and we can do it.
My day job, I run a small nonprofit called Chicago Cred that's laser focused on reducing gun violence in my hometown of Chicago. I always say it's the hardest work I've ever done, the most heartbreaking, honestly, but also the most inspiring, hopefully the most meaningful over time. We just had our safest year in 60 years, which is great. Day to day is very tough. One of our young guys was shot in the back Friday afternoon, got out, working with him Saturday to help stop the retaliation. He was amazing how he handled that. So that's 90% of what I'm doing. 10%, I'm deeply worried about our democracy, and so I'm trying to do what I can to help preserve our democracy and help preserve an education system that's been dismantled. And I just always honest, I really feel there's a leadership vacuum now educationally in the country. We don't know where we're going or why or what we're doing. And I think it's so important for us to do things together. She's probably getting sick of me. I got here about 5 o'clock yesterday. This is our third event together in like 12 hours. But we're friends. I think deep respect goes back a long way. And it's just talking backstage for you that your young people don't know what that looks like. They've never lived in a world where people from different parties can actually work together towards a mutual goal. And I always think education should be the ultimate bipartisan, nonpartisan issue. So 90% focus on getting less folks shot at home, 10% trying to work on our democracy, and whatever we can do individually, collectively to help provide some leadership on the education front, I'm all in for that.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, our I don't know the percentage, call it half of our staff at Whiteboard Advisors are under age 30. So I remember fondly you coming in, you were working in the White House before you were U.S. Secretary of Education. You had like, you know, George Miller and Senator Kennedy and President Bush and, you know, and Judd Gregg. Everybody's like John Boehner and, you know, Lamar. I mean, I guess he wasn't there, but like high-fiving one another. You know, over the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act.
87 to 10 in the Senate.
87-10 in the Senate. You look at, like, you know, you see these clips of like President Bush congratulating Speaker Pelosi, you know, in the state of, and this is like, you know, a fiction, I think, to folks in there, you know, who graduated from college in 2020, 2019. So maybe just to sort of like, you know, translate that fiction into reality. Maybe just talk for a minute about some areas where you two have alignment. And I know you've been spending a lot of time together over the last couple of days.
Well, we have more alignment than not. We believe that every kid in this country can and should have the opportunity to be successful, that's going to take a commitment to basic skills like reading and math and the tools that we know are table stakes, whatever AI brings us or doesn't. We know that accountability and transparency is critically important. We know that the right calibration between a federal role and the state compact. We you know, grew up in states, cities, and states, and we know that's where the action is. And we believe that resources can be deployed around big goals effectively when we get that compact right, that calibration right between states, federal authorities, and local governments, if we have a belief that everybody can get there.
We can get into the debate or nuances on policy, but just sort of big picture, we both think education is a civil rights issue, that we have a history in our nation where opportunity is fundamentally unequal. And the only chance to build a successful life, the only chance to have upward economic mobility and support a family and own a home is to have a great educational opportunity. And that's not the norm historically, and it's not the norm today. And so I made more than my share of mistakes. She probably didn't make as many as I did. But I think that was sort of the North Star for us, is how do we create opportunity for kids in communities that are underserved? And, suppose you can't talk about equity now or whatever, this is a fight for equity, and unapologetically a fight for equity. And we are growing more unequal. And just the loss of talent, the loss of entrepreneurs, the loss of job creators in our country, I just think we can't afford to leave that talent on the sidelines. So we can talk about all the, how to get to those goals, but I think that's been the driving force for both of us, is how do we get better, faster as a country? How do we give more kids a chance to be in rooms like this? I say that, the ticket to entry here is, I think probably 100% of you have a college degree. To get into rooms like this, you have to have a college diploma. Most of America doesn't have that. So most of America is locked out of rooms like this. Something's wrong with that. That's what's dividing our country now. That's what we fought and are trying to continue to fight, to have more people have the chance to be in rooms like this.
Let's come back to college in a second, but you're talking a little bit about state role. I mean, the No Child Left Behind Act, arguably like the high watermark of sort of a muscular or more prescriptive federal role in education, K-12 education, was really like a reflection or a manifestation of what was happening in states at the time. It was, states were laboratories of innovation. Those practices were sort of enshrined through federal policy. But it was a federal policy predicated on what was working in states. Arnie, when you were secretary, in Secretary Spellings, I think you had Katrina kind of open the door on some of the waivers, but there was a policy of broad-based waiver of federal requirements, district level, state level, and so just playing devil's advocate. So I would be a good moderator if I probably wouldn't, but if you think about the federal role versus the state role, I live in Alabama now. It's not where I'm from. People are talking about the Southern surge, what's happening in Mississippi and Alabama. In the absence of a really muscular federal role, states are stepping up. So what's concerning to you as former U.S. Secretaries of Education with respect to returning more power to the states?
Well, No Child Left Behind and the elements of it that are still on the books today, by the way, measure every year, disaggregate the data, et cetera. Those are still on the books. And the Mississippi Miracle and the Alabama and Louisiana and all the Southern surge, that is made possible because the federal government had a research role. We talked about this a second ago. That was proffered initially by the Clinton administration to bring us the National Reading Panel that wrought the science of reading, et cetera. And so these ideas and theories and policies were incubated in places like Texas and North Carolina, bipartisan, Jim Hunt, George Jebb, et cetera, and in cities. And so, it was really a ground-up deal. And so I say to my conservative friends, look, if we're going to spend a bunch of federal money, we ought to get something for it. If it is supposed to be in service to student achievement around a civil right, let's see how we're doing. Are we getting anything for it? We tried to put the money out and hope for the best for a long, long time, and we didn't have very much to show for it. And we're back to that again, by the way. So anyway, I believe that we can get this right. It is not against the law to improve student achievement in states, and never has been. Show us your work.
Show the work.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Southern surge is real and powerful. I spent a couple of days in Jackson, Mississippi, really trying to understand it. And it's not the Mississippi Miracle, it's the Mississippi Marathon. It was like 20 years, and other folks are doing well. But Ben, we have to be very honest here. That's a handful of states, maybe. If you look across the country on NAEP, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
So let's not think this is some massive innovation coming from the states. If you have 5 states, 10% of our states moving, 40 states flat or declining, that's not something, 45 states, flatline or declining. This is not a time where we can say this is going great. And so I don't for a second think this is a time to take the foot off the gas or to push harder. What I do think at the national level, we should have a couple goals that I call nation building goals, not left or right goals. Access to high-quality early childhood education, which is arguably the best investment we can make, a focus on 3rd or 4th grade reading scores, which we know is critical, raising high school graduation rates and rigor, and then raising college completion rates. For me, if we could be clear on those goals at the national level, and states have some flexibility, of how to achieve those. I always say tight on goals, loose on means.
Yeah.
But those should be goals that our country should unite behind for the next 20 years, 30 years. But right now as a country, we have 0 education goals, nothing. If I asked any of you, what's our goal education for the country, nobody here could give me an answer.
Yeah.
We have no strategies to achieve goals. We have no metrics to measure goals. We have no public transparency. So we're lost now, and that for me is not a good place for our country, for our economy, for our democracy.
You know, the thing about the goals that Arnie talks about is people understand, what does that mean? What does it mean to get out of high school? What does it mean to read on third grade level? And so that's what's lost. Right now we're talking about pathways and work. What is a pathway? What is it? What's the rigor of it? For whom, when, how much? And so I think we've kind of lost our way because of this. What are our goals? Dang it.
Well, we got 6 minutes and 7 seconds. So I'm gonna go pretty rapid fire here and just get into the weeds, because that's kind of where I live sometimes. So one, reading. This drives me crazy. So I want to give you some credit here and just get your perspective. So National Reading Panel, Clinton Initiative, publishes the findings. Everybody's sort of like, it's controversial, but we sort of, we figure out a lot of stuff with respect to the science of reading. Federal government formulates policy in the form, like reading first, pretty prescriptive, muscular federal role, $2 billion carve out from Title I.
Tripled funding.
It works. It works. And like over quite some period of time, Bush administration through into the Obama administration, but eventually, that program was dismantled. Then we have a podcast, Sold a Story, and all of a sudden everybody's like fired up about the work that you were doing in 2000, 2001. So I want to acknowledge and give you credit for that. Because it had a profound impact on kids and families all around the country.
Well, and one
but just curious, like your thoughts. Like are you indignant? Like,
welcome aboard, everybody. Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
I think the object lesson there is that this stuff is political, and why it's important that we continue to keep the band together, like we had in the No Child Left Behind era of the business community and the civil rights community, coming together and insisting upon clear goals, high standards, measurement, transparency, disaggregation, and so forth. And so, look, it pisses me off, but hey, what are you going to do? Welcome aboard.
I love it. All right, so then maybe it, like in somewhat of a similar vein, I just want to just acknowledge. I mean, your I think it was Washington Post op-ed on ECA. Like, it's interesting. You go back and look at the history. So you had like the Milwaukee voucher experiment, and I remember you had Clinton and the pushing charters. Senator Lieberman, my home state senator, and so people think about like charters as being some sort of like right way, but it was Minnesota, it was Pennsylvania, back in like '91.
Arizona.
But now what's pretty cool is, I mean, like I'm not sure, Arnie, you could choke down the words "Big Beautiful Bill Act," but yet you did that piece and talked about why the ECA and what was happening was important for states to get behind, because it was good and it created pockets of liquidity for kids and families. But maybe I'd love to get your take on what you see as like a bipartisan future for school choice as well, and maybe just some of the rationale behind your support of that.
Yeah, and very personal. I'm just, again, very, very honest. So ICE invaded Chicago. I deal with gun violence every single day, gang violence. ICE was the largest, most resourced, best armed gang I've ever seen. What I saw in the streets was horrific. It's something I'm never going to forget. And what they did to our community was horrific. And that was federally sponsored gun violence. About a month ago, I went to Minneapolis and spent time with the educators and faith leaders there. What happened there was exponentially worse than what happened in Chicago. You sort of read about it and think you understand, but you really don't. So right now, if I have a tax dollar in Illinois, Chicago, do I want to send that to Washington to fund ICE to come terrorize my community? Or do I want to take that tax dollar to help a kid in Chicago or downstate go to after school or summer school or get some tutoring or get whatever? For me, that's not even close. I don't want to fund my oppressor. That's insane. I want to fund kids who are too far behind. And so for me, it's very just practical and real. This is not, it's not whatever. It's a very clear choice. I'm always been a believer in choice. I want high quality options for kids. I want accountability where we have choice. It's not unfettered accountability. I put hundreds of millions of dollars behind charters to replicate and grow. And I also went to the National Charters Conference and said, 200 of your schools are dropout factories and you need to close them. So for me, the goal is not choice. The goal is better student outcomes. I'm going to go back to our goals. And where you have great choices, that helps you have more good, high-quality student outcomes.
All right, minute 22. So, yeah, thanks. College. You talked about sort of degree as a gatekeeper. I think your administration was sort of typified in part by like sort of the college for all push. You know, and we do now have this emphasis on sort of pathways. You know, nobody likes to say alternative pathways. You know, and I think we have this like cognitive dissonance around college. I was just visiting a really amazing charter school. You know, 100% low income, vast majority first-gen college students if they go to college, touting a 96% college admission rate. That's what we for many years thought of as a great school. 40% of those students never graduate from college. And we need lots of people doing jobs that are high paying, you know, that the economy needs, that don't necessarily have degrees. So how do you think about just sort of reconciling the historic like college for all push with the realities of the labor market and multitude of pathways to sort of economic mobility? Sorry, I'm not giving us much time.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a both-and situation. And, you know, whether you're going to be a plumber, electrician, or a PhD mathematician, you got to be able to read and compute at some level of proficiency. And we are so far behind in doing that right now. Higher ed has been so dumbed down, grade inflated, or whatever, that people don't have an understanding or confidence in what that proxy, that diploma means much anymore. And so I think, you know, we got to get our act together here about how are we going to evidence value in the economy and value for what you pay. And we got a long way to go to do that.
Just quickly, for me, a high school diploma is critical, but it's insufficient. It's some form of education beyond that. Four-year university, two-year community college, trade, technical, vocational training. I don't care what that is, but it's got to be more than a high school diploma. Where I worry on the pathways, alternative pathways, that's almost always for other kids. That's for black and brown kids. That's for poor kids. And if that's what they want to do, fantastic. But I don't want to say that path is for you, and this path is for kids that look like me, look like us three up here. Yep. I just want to make sure they have lots of great options and let them pursue what their dream, what their genius, what their passion is.
Yeah. We're over time. I just want to, on a personal note, just acknowledge how much just respect and appreciation I have for both of you. You know, you could be doing lots of stuff with your time, and I know that you're in the arena fighting hard around bipartisanship in Washington, and I see it day in and day out, and you're engaged and working extraordinarily hard. And Arnie, I think you're one of the people I just admire most. I think you know, you're like feet on the street, and I know how viscerally you feel and experience just the importance of the work that you're doing, working with, you know, guys like I grew up with, and keeping them alive, which is a first order of business. So just huge thanks to you both for being here, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.
Great job. All right, thanks everybody. To close out our morning session, we turn to a conversation about new models, bold bets, and entrepreneurial ideas reshaping education. Joining us are Mackenzie Price, co-founder of Alpha School, and Austin Allred, founder of Gauntlet AI. They'll be joined by Claire Zhao, who many of us know as the queen of all things AI in education, or Zowie Talks, partner and AI lead at GSV Ventures. We said this yesterday, but celebrating Claire with her Power of Women Award, but she truly is someone who makes everybody smarter in the room. So I am so pleased to welcome to the stage Mackenzie, Austin, and Claire.
So day 2 of ASU+GSV, and I am so excited to be here with Austin and Mackenzie, because I feel like you all I mean, just before I've even met you all, have heard about the work that you all are doing and have listened to interviews and podcasts with you all. So very excited to hear more about how you all are thinking about broken systems today, especially in education. You all are both tackling it, but kind of different ends of it. Mackenzie, you started as a frustrated parent. Austin, you're more so focused on post-secondary pipelines. But I want to start with a question that everyone asks when they hear your names. What were you all so frustrated with that you decided that the answer wasn't necessarily reform, but rather building something completely new?
Well, you hit it right on the head. I was a frustrated mom. When it was time for my girls to go to school, we sent them to our local public school district, which is considered one of the very best in Texas. And very quickly, we were hit with the realization that it is impossible, no matter how devoted, no matter how well trained the teacher is, you cannot meet the needs of 18, 20, or even more kids in a class who are at wildly different levels. And I would try from within that system to say, hey, can we do a little bit of personalization? Can we have some independent study? And I will say, hitting that question to the school system with a 6-year-old and 7-year-old, they were kind of like, just go away for right now. And I just realized that trying to build within this system was going to be an impossible task. So I looked around. I realized it wasn't about moving to private school. It was really a model issue. The teacher in front of the classroom in a time-based system where everyone moves up according to age is the issue. And so we decided to really reinvent school from the ground up with a first principles vision. And given doing that, what would school look like if we really could just abandon the traditional system? And it starts with the fundamental premise that kids should love school. And when I say love school, I mean rather go to school than go on vacation, because when that is possible, we're enabling kids to do really hard things when they show up excited and love to do that. And then we're leveraging AI technology to finally provide that one-to-one mastery-based tutoring experience that has been impossible to do in a traditional classroom until now. And of course, that saves so much time in the day. Our kids can learn twice as much in only a couple hours. And that really leads to what I think is probably the most interesting question is, what do you do with the rest of the school day? And for us at Alpha, the answer is help students develop the life skills that they're going to need to be successful in this world.
Yeah, before I get into Gauntlet, which I think is also an interesting rethink of existing models, what does a day at Alpha School look like? Tangibly, what does that student experience look like?
We get a lot of misconceptions, and some of you may have them in the room, of this robot dystopian isolated thing with kids locked in, computer rooms, and it's the opposite. And Austin can probably attest to that because he's got 2 kids who also go to Alpha School. But it is enabling kids to have so much time to connect, not only with their classmates, but also with the adults that are in our building. We don't call them teachers, and the reason we don't call them teachers is because I think it would be unfair to say they're teachers when they're not teaching academic core subjects. We call them guides. And so in the morning, kids come together for what we call Limitless Launch. It's a chance to do something that gets them excited and connected and kind of ready to take on their day, incorporate growth mindset strategies. And then they go into their 2-hour learning core time. At that point, you can have a bunch of kids sitting right next to each other. One 7-year-old is working on algebra, while the 7-year-old next to him is working on his fast math. And that is kind of one of the beautiful things that you get to see in this model. During that time, our guides are supporting our kids. They're motivating them and connecting with them and teaching them that skill of learning how to learn. And then by lunchtime, academics are done, and the afternoon is where we do these life skills workshops. So kids are doing everything from connecting with senior citizens at a senior citizen home to planting gardens, growing food, and then selling that at a local farmer's market and donating proceeds to food banks, to running Tough Mudders and bike races and building businesses, and really getting to explore their interests and build the skills that you need: leadership and teamwork and relationship building, financial literacy, all of that. So it's still a full school day, and there's so much to do. But I think fundamentally what we're doing in this model, and you see this no matter what school you go to of ours, we're giving kids their most valuable resource, which is time to go do the things in the afternoon that get them really excited to put in the work in the morning to crush their academics.
Yeah. So you almost saw school in kind of first principles manner. With Gauntlet, how have you thought about this attainment of skills from first principles?
Yeah, so we're in a very interesting space, which is AI. And, Mackenzie started her conversation with how she went to public schools. We started out going to universities, but it was such a non-starter. We said, what's missing from the experience of learning AI? And we were talking to a couple university presidents, and they said, we can't even change curriculum in less than 3 years if we're really trying to, and we're not necessarily trying to. And the reality for us is the curriculum of AI changes so dramatically. Right now we run 4 cohorts a year, they're each 10 weeks. We will completely rewrite the curriculum from one cohort to the next cohort because AI changes that dramatically. Everything we do is very project-based, you're building stuff, but we use a lot of AI to build our curriculum because we have to. We're just in a landscape that's changing so dramatically fast that by the time our students are getting toward graduation at the end of their 10 weeks, if you were to ask them what they would do if they had to use AI and the models and the tools as they were on the day they joined Gauntlet, they're like, oh, I can't even imagine going back into that ancient history, and that's 10 weeks. Everything that we do has to be built to, like Mackenzie mentioned, learn to learn, but also everything is adapting on the fly. Every day we have to spend probably on average per student up to an hour a day just disseminating and understanding and wrapping our minds around the knowledge that came out in the past 24 hours. And that's never, to my knowledge, been true in education before. So it's a very different challenge.
Yeah. As people in charge of teaching this next generation, how do you balance learning how to learn and, core actual knowledge itself? It sounds like, you all have been able to compress that into 2-hour learning. I think, have seen criticism around, are we actually able to distill everything we want to teach to a kid in that 2-hour block? Or even, in Gauntlet's case, how do you actually think about this balance between disseminating knowledge itself, but also cultivating those critical skills?
Having knowledge in your brain is, I think, more important than ever. This is not the time to outsource knowledge and say, hey, AI knows it. In order to be a great critical thinker and to develop the skills that are going to be so important in this world, which is communication and creativity and collaboration, you have to have knowledge to draw upon. And people find it surprising to think there's no way you can get academics done in 2 hours a day, but just remember the classroom that you stood in when you were a kid or that you might be in now, and realize just how wildly inefficient the time is used in a traditional classroom. And so when our students are able to go in and get exactly the level and pace of learning that meets them where they're at, it is so much faster. And we've known this for 40 years, that kids can learn 2, 5, 10 times faster with that. And so, we believe that table stakes are the core academic knowledge that kids can have. And then where it gets interesting is helping our students develop that skill, because this is such an exciting time in the world with the acquisition and development of knowledge that you really do need kids to learn and the guides to be able to show them, hey, we may not know something, but let's go figure it out together. Let's become experts on whatever subject that we're interested in doing. And gone are the days when we should expect young people to just be consumers who sit back and wait for someone to feed information to them. We have to help people learn to go rabidly after new information, because it really is amazing that something that we didn't know about last week or technology couldn't do last week, that it can now, that will be obsolete a week from now. That is the most important skill, and we give kids the opportunity, literally starting in kindergarten, to develop that skill.
Yeah, as you both have this unique window into how people are being funneled into the workforce or their future careers, is the future project-based? Like, how do we prepare people for this future?
Man, that's a really good and big question. So from our vantage, the reason that we exist is because there is a need for people with a skill set that are not available. It's not, normally if you talk to an employer and you say, okay, if you want to hire somebody who does X, the answer is, well, I'll go find someone who has done X for 15 years and they probably studied X in college. For us, that fundamentally does not exist. It has to be created for the employers. And so, our model is it's completely free for the students. We cover all food, housing, travel. We fly you into Austin. We have apartments for you. We feed you 3 times a day. We have people do your laundry and clean your room just so we can be purely focused on building with AI. And the employers that come to us say this is literally the only place we can find this because it's difficult for an engineer to take 10 weeks off. And we'd go 100-hour weeks, quite literally. We're 8 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Saturday, and then noon to midnight on Sunday. So kids are very, very intensely learning. And it's to a point now where the model providers come to us and ask what's happening, because nobody knows. It's just a very fundamental unknown. But if you understand these tools and how to use them, I think it's the greatest force multiplier for human talent that there has ever been. To where, we work with companies on the corporate training side, and they come in with a, 6-week roadmap on Monday, and we finish it on Tuesday. It's a completely different way of thinking about how to build, about what the world looks like. It's just wildly, wildly different, and really, really exciting.
Yeah. On that question, though, as you think about scaling this, right? It sounds like it's worked for the cohort of people you currently serve. What does success at scale look like from a price point, from a scaling point? How do you expand beyond the existing model that you already have?
We have very lofty goals. Right now, Alpha is known as being the high-end, expensive private school, and it absolutely is. And there is, a group of families around the country that have been craving this kind of education. But in order to truly become scalable, you have to add access, and we realize that's critical. And I think what 26 is going to be known for with us is really rolling that model out. And in our home state of Texas, when ESAs were made possible last year, that opened up an ability for us to take our Texas Sports Academy, where students are getting the same Alpha time back platform that Alpha students get in in-person schools, and combining it with their interest in sports. And we've had several thousand people sign up for our Texas Sports Academy that will begin this fall. And given the success and the popularity of the vouchers, all of the families that receive those vouchers will be coming from incomes of less than $65,000 a year. The school will be free for them. And so this is going to be the opportunity where we're able to provide that same academic experience with the motivation model for students free of charge. And we are hopeful that this will serve as a blueprint and a model for what is possible across the country.
Austin, on your end, do you have, it sounds like there is massive demand for this, but do you have ambitions to scale beyond? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the question that keeps me up at night right now. We have more demand from our hiring partners than we have students right now. And part of that is because we are so selective, and we make our hiring partners pay up front. So you have to pay us money before you can walk in the door and meet the students and interview people. So it's not a small commitment on the hiring partner side. But the big thing that we're thinking about in terms of expansion right now is non-engineering fields. And that's obviously a really big and abstract bucket, but there are, not only engineers can do a lot more with AI. Every field, every line of work, every person within a company can do a lot more if they're using or utilizing AI correctly. We're trying to figure out the right way to approach that, whether it's by vertical, or whether it's, abstract non-engineering training. We don't quite know the answer to that yet, but that's the thing that eats at me at night. So we're figuring it out.
It is interesting to think about, Mackenzie, your kids are doing financial literacy and entrepreneurship in middle school, and then Austin, it sounds like you all are kind of running internships for Stanford, MIT kids who apparently need skills that they're not getting at these institutions. Do your models eventually converge, or are you solving fundamentally different problems?
Well, I think there's a big question happening right now, which is what is the point of higher education? And our answer is we want our students to be prepared to go off and do whatever it is that they want to do. So if they want to go to a 4-year degree and experience college, they should be ready to do that. And if they're ready to go launch their business or their Broadway musical, whatever interests they have, they should have the skills that help them to be successful. And I think Austin gives such a great point. We've had our high school students flying around the country teaching adults how to use OpenClaw, teaching them how to build an agent that gives business. And we have a great 16-year-old girl who on her 16th birthday, she got her first customer from an agent that she had built to help provide service business. And she's like, what a great birthday present. She had started this business idea 2 weeks before. And so the pace of innovation that we're seeing our students be able to build out just by being able to be AI first and combine it with critical thinking skills that they've developed and the other life skills they've had, going out and being okay with rejection training and receiving feedback. Those skills are helping our students be successful. And so we are seeing, so far, really great response from both universities as well as the job market, saying we like the kind of kids that you guys are developing because they really do have these skills that are going to be important.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really our core focus is getting people to the cutting edge of AI and letting them ride that wave. Because right now it is vertical. And we've seen people exit Gauntlet after 10 weeks with salaries of almost $1 million. That's not the norm and that's not the median. That's not what I'm saying. But I think we have a greater opportunity to apply human leverage right now than we ever have. And I think we might be one of the very few schools that get you to the cutting edge. But my mind all day, every day is about how do you get as many people to the cutting edge of AI? Because if you can get there, it's going to change again in 6 months. I'm not smart enough to predict what it will all look like in 2 years. I wouldn't have predicted, where we are now a year ago. But if we can teach you the skills and get you there and keep you adapting and staying on that wave, then that's a very, very good place to be in any economy. So.
On that note, I know you mentioned you can't predict even beyond 2 years, but there is a lot of anxiety about, when we enter this AGI world and there are no jobs and what do we prepare people for? As parents, as people, who have young children, or a lot of people in this audience who interface with a lot of young 22-year-olds who are just graduating, or even, people in mid-careers worried about what's next for them. What do you think they should do differently in this moment? And what have you learned from what you're building that influences this advice?
For us, it is all about helping students find their passion and their motivation. Because in already our traditional world, if a kid's not motivated, they're kind of up the creek, and that's only going to become more true. And so it is critical that schools provide opportunities for students to find out what makes them tick, what gets them excited every day to get up and go and build or develop or create something. And I think if we could focus everything we do around motivating students, which our model is doing on a very small scale by transforming that role of the teacher, that is going to help make people who are successful and can bring skills long into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because the people who I've seen adapt to this moment extremely well have been those who have been highly agentic. They've taken agency over this moment, and if anything, it's all those skills that you are cultivating at a school like Alpha School, where in many ways everyone is becoming a mini entrepreneur, and so to be able to cultivate that at middle school, when they graduate from university, just ways that AI can unlock that within them is extremely exciting. Austin, what are you seeing?
Yeah, my mental model is that most of the people that are in Gauntlet are going to work highly paid jobs that do not exist right now in the near future. So, again, repeating the mantra of, first of all, if you know someone who's in that scenario, they should apply to Gauntlet AI. We need more applicants. But what we're seeing on a kind of macroeconomic sense is the people that are able to use AI are able to get a lot more done. And the fear becomes, okay, if somebody can get a lot more done, maybe there's a need for far fewer of those people. We've seen the inverse. We've seen that as people are able to do a lot more with AI, obviously you want to hire more and more of those people to do more with AI. So I don't know what happens when, if AGI is smarter than all of us and there's no more jobs anymore. That's a separate conversation. But until then, I think there's plenty of opportunity for people who are, like you said, agentic and independent thinking and able to wrap their minds around the fact that your career is not going to look like one 40-year-long skill set anymore. And if you can learn and adapt as AI advances, you'll be in a very powerful position.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, in this moment, you all have created spaces for it, but truly in this moment, you can just build things. So join me in thanking Mackenzie and Austin for a fantastic conversation. Excited to see what else you all build.
All right, thank you everybody for joining us for our Breakfast StageX session. We're going to take a quick break and then come back for 12 for lunch. So see you all soon. Thank you so much.